Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to a discussion on international student wellness. My name is Batsirai Bunzawabaya. I go by Batsi, and I am a staff psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania's Counseling Center, also known as CAPS, and I use she, her pronouns. Just as you're getting started, please know that we are recording the presentation part of our discussion today. But when we get into question and answer round, we are going to stop recording just to allow you to feel more comfortable to engage with us. But of course, feel free to ask as many questions as you'd like in the Q&A. And of course, let us know if there's any information that would be helpful for you today. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Rosalie, who will introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rosaline Lin. I'm a doctoral intern at CAPS, and I'm also co-facilitating the International Student Empowerment Group. It's very nice to be here today.
So you'll hear Rosaline and I talk a little bit more about who we are and what our work is today, and just give you a sense of some of the topics that we'll discuss. So we're going to give a short presentation and then again have a question and answer round. Ryan, do you mind going to the next slide? So we wanted to go ahead and let you know a little bit about what CAPS is and part of our wellness division. So CAPS is Counseling and Psychological Services. It is the counseling center on campus. Students come to see us for a wide range of concerns. So there's no issue that's too big or too small when it comes to coming in for support. So international students can come and talk about relationships. You can come and talk about adjusting to being in the US. You could talk about what it feels like to be away from home. And you can talk about academic concerns, career concerns. So anything that is causing you any stress or things that you just want to improve upon, CAPS can be a good place and a resource to go. We are currently offering our services via video and phone. So we're using teletherapy options. But if you do want to be seen in person, you just have to call ahead and let us know. And we can arrange for you to be seen in person if needed. We also have, as part of the wellness division, alcohol and other drugs, and they provide support around various substance use. And they have brief interventions that are helpful for individuals as well as groups in coping with issues related to alcohol and other drugs. We also have student health service. This is the place where you would go if you have any physical health concerns. They are also offering telehealth options, but again, you can be seen in person if needed. You just have to call ahead for a brief screening. And then last but not least, there's campus health. And this is the part of the wellness division that oversees disease surveillance and prevention. So as you can imagine, they are busy right now with doing COVID contact tracing, and again, making sure that we are safe and overseeing some of the promotion and policies around wellness work. So this is the full division of wellness, but today we're going to speak specifically about CAPS. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Rosaline, who's going to tell you specifically what we're going to talk about today. Ryan, next slide.
Yes, so today's presentation, we already did a brief introduction and we'll do a check-in activity. And then we talked about stressors for international students and also ways to cope with mental health stressors at this time. And then we will end with the Q&A session. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to type in the chat. We also will have some time in the end to answer any questions that you have. We can go to the next slide. So we would like to begin our presentation by checking in on how you're feeling today. So we want to invite you to write in the chat box writing 3 words that describe how you're feeling today. Looks like people are feeling all kinds of different ways. Feeling rested, feeling motivated. Also, some people feel tired, anxious, and hopeful. So I think this is a activity that we want to check in about how you're feeling, and it's very important during this time to really attend to how we're feeling, and that will give us information on how we can best support ourselves. Thank you for participating in this activity. We can go to the next slide. So here are some stressors for international students. During this time, there are a lot of layers of loss and disappointment. It can be that graduation date has been changed, or internship has been canceled or postponed. So there are a lot of stress that can be related to these big events, and feeling loss, experience loss and disappointment. It's also, if you're staying with your family members, it might be difficult to manage the difficult family dynamic. Also, family and friends illness or death due to COVID, that's also a very big loss. And there might be a lot of feelings around that as well, and that can be a very big stressor. Also, difficulty maintaining self-care, mental health conditions, or a history of trauma can be present at this moment. Also, dealing with stress, issues around visa, jobs, isolation. There are a lot of uncertainty about immigration policies, and things like that are very stressful as well. Some students may also experience limited education and social experience studying at Penn, not able to attend to regular in-person activities can be very challenging sometimes, and also the limited educational opportunities at this time, and everything moving to virtual. There's a lot of adjustment that goes into that. Students can also experience social isolation and feeling lonely in this time. And I think the next one is people probably experience a lot is space or technology issues that interfering with learning. So internet connections and all these other things that can happen during a video conferencing call. And so that can add on to the already very stressful situation. And also difficulty navigating the virtual learning environment, connecting with professors and friends and classmates in a very different way, and it might require a different set of skills. It can also be very tiring sometimes. So the last one is digital overload. So being in all the virtual classes, meetings, and internships, Zoom fatigue can be one of the stressors that international students are experiencing. So the typical normal school is already very stressful. And then on top of that, we're all coping with pandemic and making a lot of adjustments and a lot of uncertainty. So these are some of the stressors that international students may experience during this time. And I would turn the presentation to Betsy.
Great. Thank you, Rosaline. And as you heard, there are so many different stressors that international students may be feeling, maybe some that we may not have fully shared. So before we provide some thoughts on some of the ways that you could be coping right now, what are some of the ways you have been coping during this time, given all the stressors we mentioned? If you can write in the chat, what are some of the things that you have done that have been helpful for you? So I'll just give you a minute to do that. All right, so it looks like we have some responses. For some of you, it sounds like talking to friends and family has been helpful, so getting some of that social support. For others, working out daily and staying in touch with best friends. Yep, that sounds like, again, a great way of trying to take care of yourself. For some of you, it's been playing the guitar, doing laundry, house projects, and gardening. Yeah, so maybe being able to really sort of invest in like activities that you enjoy, but also maybe just some things that'll help you feel a little bit grounded, right? As long as those things are taken care of, maybe they help you to feel a little bit more settled, right? I think one of the things, as Rosalie mentioned, it can feel like there's so much uncertainty, there's so much change around us. And at times being able to focus on these small things that we can do in order to take care of ourselves can definitely help in coping during this time. So thank you all who responded. So we'll go ahead and move to the next slide, and we'll share some of the suggestions that we want to provide you. So the first is we want to encourage you to think about any substances that you are using right now, whether that's alcohol or any other drugs, and think about limiting that. We know that at times, substance use can lead to changes in mood. It can lead to, difficulty in terms of how you're regulating your well-being, like sleep and eating. So just really thinking about how some of those substances that you're using may be impacting you, and maybe considering limiting them just to make sure that you're promoting your sense of wellness. The other thing we want to try to suggest is, as Rosaline was saying at the beginning of the presentation, remember to share your feelings, right? Sometimes that can be really hard because it can make us feel very vulnerable. And maybe culturally, it can be challenging for us to do that. But if you are sharing with your friends and family or people that you trust, it can feel like a relief to feel like you have support in that moment, especially if maybe some of the feelings you're having are really, really difficult, such as feeling sad or feeling anxious or angry or irritable. It can be helpful just to talk, and it can feel like a bit of a release. And of course, you can come to CAPS and do that, or just call us and be able to share your feelings as well. The next thing that I think a few of you already shared in the chat, we want to encourage you to connect with other people. And part of this connection is to make sure that you're getting support, but we really want to encourage you to also seek help and support early. Sometimes people feel like when they're upset or distressed, or even whether it's physically or emotionally sick, that you have to wait until things get really bad. And part of what we want to encourage you in promoting your wellness is try to seek help early. So if you're noticing signs that maybe you're not doing as well as you typically would, or you're noticing that an issue that you've had in the past is starting to return, make sure that you seek help and seek help early. Sometimes for us, we can feel like it's a sign of weakness to seek help, but we really want to reinforce that it's actually really important for your well-being, and it's actually a sign of strength to be able to make sure that you are getting the support that you need. So please feel free to reach out as much as you need to. The next point we want to put is take breaks from news and social media. So of course, we all want to stay informed, making sure that we know what's going on, whether it's within the US or all over the world. But sometimes you can get overwhelmed, and the news or social media can have information that can be upsetting to us and dysregulate our mood, right? So just being mindful that you're staying informed, but then maybe you're not getting to the place where you feel saturated and you feel overwhelmed by all the information you're getting. So try to maintain some balance and maybe have some boundaries. So if you notice that you checking the news or social media in the morning, early in the morning, is setting a negative tone for your day, or you can't sleep because you've been looking through social media, then maybe trying to check social media or news during the day, right? So that when you are going to bed or when you're waking up, it's allowing you to have a positive sort of outlook or ability to actually sleep at night. The next point we want to emphasize is maintain a self-care routine. So this can be really, really challenging, especially now, because we're all learning new routines. Now that the pandemic has been part of our lives for as long as it has been. But as much as you can, try to figure out, when you've been going to sleep, how much you've been eating, how much time are you leaving to socialize, how much time are you leaving to rest, and trying to make sure that you have as much balance. Obviously, some days may be harder than others in terms of being able to regulate your daily schedule. But as much as you can, try to think about what balance looks like for you and try to figure out how to foster a good self-care routine. The third point that we want to emphasize as we get close to the end here is really reminding you as much as you can to cultivate hope. Again, there's so much in the world that can feel exhausting or demoralizing. And what are some of the things you try to do in order to make sure that you are finding moments of hope? Something that might be helpful is cultivating gratitude. So being able to think of small things that you feel grateful for. So an example can be being grateful that the sun came out in the morning, or being grateful for a good meal that you had, or for the friends and family in your life. So trying to think about a gratitude practice and a way of cultivating hope is really important. Another thing we want to remind you to do is recognize and set your physical and emotional boundaries. Sometimes it's hard because we have a lot of pressure, not just socially, but academically, and it can feel like we are maybe experiencing a sense of being overwhelmed or maybe a little bit of chaos in our lives. Try to think about where your physical and emotional boundaries are. So maybe friends are asking for support, and maybe you do not have the emotional capacity to do that. So just check in with yourself, know what makes sense for you, and set boundaries that allow you to take care of yourself. At times, we need to make sure that we are fully well charged and well rested in terms of our energy before we can support other people. So just really making sure that you're thinking about what your boundaries are and communicating them, because unfortunately, people can't always guess what we need, and just making sure that you are staying true to yourself in terms of what you can cope with. And of course, if you need academic support or if you need support around immigration concerns, there are resources on campus that can help you navigate that. And then lastly, we want to encourage you to identify and stay grounded in your purpose and your sense of meaning. So again, the pandemic can lead to us feeling a sense of, second guessing some of our decisions, maybe thinking about changing plans. And part of what you can try to do is really think about, like, what's your sense of purpose at this point? It doesn't have to be anything big. It can be just even something small, like making sure that you're a good friend or a good partner or a good support to the people around you, right? So being able to stay rooted in that purpose for yourself and finding meaning, even if it's meaning in small things throughout the day, that can actually really help you feel grounded. So those are some of the general suggestions for coping we have. And then we also have a little more information on some of the commonly asked questions that we have received from students. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Rosalie to start the first two.
Thank you, Betsy. So the first commonly asked question is, how do I maintain social relationships in the virtual world? So here are our recommendations or suggestions: is to be open to try new ways of connecting with others through a virtual platform. It can be through audio message, video message, all these different ways. And to explore campus resources and activities. So pre-pandemic, there are a lot of activities that are around campus. And during the pandemic, we still have a lot of activities on campus. And so it's really be open and to explore all these resources on campus. Maybe there are some events that normally you wouldn't go because of distance, because of time. And now you maybe that will work with your schedule, and you can just hop onto this virtual platform and attend these conversation or event. So the next question is, how do I manage time zone differences? And first of all, I want to say it's really hard to navigate, to manage time zone differences. Especially if you are waking up very early in the morning or staying up very, very late to accommodate the class schedule. But here are some suggestions that you may be able to try. So one is to let your instructor know if you need support. And most instructors would be very willing to provide extra support. It can be that some of the lectures are recorded, and so you can manage your time that way. Or there are also, and to try to organize times to meet with your classmates. And this means that sometimes maybe you're getting up every morning at 3 a.m. to attend these friend group classmates gathering. And so it's really evaluating what you need at the moment, and to pick and choose what are the events that you want to attend during that time. So these are some suggestions that we have to how to manage the time zone differences. And I will pass it to Bati to talk about the other two questions.
Yeah, and just to add to something Rosaline was just mentioning about the time zone differences, sometimes you may have to ask other people to also try to work with your time, depending on where you're located, right? So trying to figure out if there's ways of compromise that sometimes you have to wake up early, and then maybe asking maybe some of your peers if they can wake up or sort of sleep a little later in order to meet your time zone, right? So maybe being able to ask for that if you need it. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the third commonly asked question, which is how do I optimize my break or quiet time? So we do want to emphasize that rest is such an important part of your success. Sometimes we can feel like when we rest, we're wasting time, but we know that that's not true. We know that your brain works better. We know that your body works better. We know that emotionally it's better for you to get some rest. So as much as you time, give yourself permission to rest. So even schedule it in your calendar. You may feel a little bit guilty at first, but once it becomes part of your routine, it feels a little bit easier just to make sure that you are resting. But again, please, please, please get some rest. It's really important for you to actually be successful, both academically and socially, and of course, in terms of your overall wellness. The other point we want to emphasize is we want to remind you to be kind to yourself. I think sometimes we tend to be, hard on ourselves, especially if we feel like we're not handling new situations well. But we want to remind you to be kind to yourself, recognize how hard you're trying, recognize your strengths. And of course, if you need to make adjustments, feel free to do that. But try to really monitor if you're being too critical on yourself, and then notice if other people in your life tend to be critical of you. And maybe those are some of the things to take into account to make sure that you are maintaining a sense of calm and allowing yourself to really thrive so that you, again, can continue to do well, both in terms of your physical and emotional health. The last question, how do I reframe my mindset during the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly when coping with the uncertainty? So again, this is hard, and it's something that, Rosaline and I think are also trying to practice, which is trying to focus on the present moment. Sometimes it's easy for our mind to think about things in the past or try to skip ahead to all the things that could happen in the future. But we just want to encourage you as much as you can, focus on the present moment, because what's happening in this moment are the things that you can actually control, and really think about what things you need in the present moment in order to actually take care of any needs that you have, whether those are physical or emotional needs. Okay? The next point we want to emphasize is normalize any challenges. As Rosaline covered earlier, there's so many things that are stressful right now. Both Rosaline and I were also international students, and it's hard. It's just hard anyway to be an international student. And then to do that during this pandemic, there are even layers of complexity, right? So there isn't anything wrong with you if you are feeling stressed out. There isn't anything wrong with you if you're experiencing a range of emotion. It is normal. But we want to encourage you to make sure that you also get help and support, because if you do not get help and support, sometimes those feelings can end up really impacting your physical and emotional wellness. So again, normalize any challenges you're having, and of course, seek help. And then last but not least, recognize your strengths. Like there's so many things I am sure you are doing well, and it's important that you remember that. There's so many things that we've been asked to change in such a short amount of time. And again, we all don't have experience living through all the different stresses we're currently living through right now. So please recognize the things you're doing well, recognize your strengths, and continue to remind yourself that you are doing the best you can under the circumstances and under all the things that you are coping with right now. A thing to remember is, if you can, practice affirmations, practice ways of sort of talking to yourself in a kind way that allow you to continue to encourage yourself, especially as you're experiencing all the different stressors that we mentioned earlier. So Rosaline, do you have anything you'd like to add before we move on to the next slide?
I think I just want to highlight the self is a part of the equation for productivity. And so when we want to be more productive, we really need to take care of ourselves so that we can maintain that the level of work that we're engaging in. And so that's something that I would like to add.
Awesome. So we'll go ahead and move to the next slide. Any questions or comments? Vivian, I believe there were 2 questions that we got earlier, but of course, if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to write them in the chat, and we'll try our best to answer them. So it looks like we have a question here. What wellness resources are there for international students? I mentioned this a little bit on the second slide. There are a lot of different wellness resources. So as I mentioned, there's student health service, there's campus health. Thank you, Ryan. And then there's alcohol and other drugs, and of course there's CAMPS. But in addition to these, many offices across campus also focus on wellness, even if that's actually not their primary role. So for instance, ISSS is also a place where there's a focus on wellness and really thinking about your wellness in a few different ways. If you've gone to any of the cultural centers, those are also places where there's a focus on making sure that there is support for your wellness as well. And the last thing I want to mention is, depending on your academic program or school, they probably have wellness initiatives through that as well. And there are also student groups that focus on wellness. So if you are interested in participating or promoting wellness as well, these are options for you too. So even though the Wellness Division specifically works on these initiatives, there are many offices on campus that are doing the same thing and thinking about promoting your wellness. So essentially, you could go anywhere on campus and get the support you need. So yeah, thank you for that question. Any other questions? So the next question is, are there any tips for combating Zoom fatigue and constant screen time? Rosaline, would you like to start with this question, and then maybe I could add to anything you say?
Yeah, that sounds good. So I think one way that we can combat Zoom fatigue is really try to decrease the time that you're spending outside of the course time on your screen. And also one way is that the position of your device, not getting as close to the device. Maybe you can create some distance between you and the device. And when you're looking into the screen, you can also look at the outside of the screen. So not paying that much intense attention on the screen sometimes can help. And also get up and move around when you need to, because we're sitting or maybe you're standing most of the day, and sometimes walking around, helping the blood flow can also help with that fatigue coming from being in Zoom all day. Anything that you would like to add, Batsy?
Sure. Something to think about if you're in a class or a meeting and all the different screens for everybody are on, but it's really only the instructor or only one person speaking, trying to actually change the speaker view so that you're actually only just focusing on the person that's speaking, as opposed to trying to look at like every little box and sort of seeing what's going on, because at times that can also be overstimulating for our brains, and again can lead maybe to you even feeling a little more nervous or self-conscious as you're kind of looking at everybody on the screen. So something to think about, especially if it's a lecture or only one person talking, maybe just change the screen view and allow yourself to just focus on the person who's speaking. And then, of course, even though a lot of what we're doing right now is on screens in terms of socializing, I know that this is a little old school, but if you can call people, then do that, because that's a way of still connecting with people, but then not doing it on screens. And then, of course, if you are reading articles, reading news or things like that, if you have an actual book for the same thing, then actually just try to take a break from using the screen and just read an actual paper copy, because that's also another way of just giving your eyes a little bit of a break. So yeah, those are some of the tips that we have for today.